And then the only solution they see is to micromanage the fuck out of their people because that gives them a little bit of control.
Welcome back to
Cultures from Hell.
Today we're diving into a topic that affects businesses, teams, and entire organizations. Leadership gone wrong. What happens when leaders make crucial mistakes? How does poor leadership impact company culture, productivity, and even employee well-being? Joining me today, as always, is my co-host Paulina, co-founder of the Culture Code Foundation and an expert in workplace culture. Paulina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lars. I love the new intro. It's a lot of fun.
Yes. Even though it is a very serious topic we're always talking about, we agreed that doing this podcast, it also has to be fun for us, right?
It has to be fun for us, and also it shouldn't be just a blatant rant
No.
when the two of us get together, right? So it's about the positivity and the good things that can come out of culture and leadership if you do it right. So it's more about going out there, sharing tips and tricks on how to do things better than they currently are.
Exactly. So let's dive into today's topic about failed leadership. But before we dive into like specific examples, because I know that you have brought some examples, or at least one example for today's topic, let's define what we mean by leadership gone wrong. What are some of the most common mistakes leaders can make?
I think there are tons of mistakes. Maybe let's take a step back and look at why those mistakes can arise at the end of the day. Because what I've seen both in my personal career and also in my business life, in terms of the customers that I've worked with, is that leaders usually don't get trained to be leaders. And it is such a crucial skill. You would not let any other job be done by a person who doesn't know how to do it, right? And you would not just push them into the cold water and just say, figure all of this shit out by yourself. You just wouldn't do it. Why do it with leadership? Leaders have such a huge level on employee well-being, on mental health of their employees. Studies actually say that your direct manager has more impact on your mental health than your therapist. I mean, let that sink in for a second here, right? So, and if you as a leader are not aware of the kind of responsibility you bear when you are in a leading position, then you shouldn't be in that position at all. So coming back to where I started, from my perspective, most leaders either lack training or they lack self-reflection or they have a lot of insecurities. And they tend to then lead to either being too controlling or to being too lax with their employees. So, and both of those leadership styles are harmful both for your people and for the business outcomes, right?
When you talk about the responsibilities that leaders have, and I completely agree with you on anything you're saying, you also kind of put a lot of, again, we have said this before, that English is not your mother tongue or my mother tongue. So I'm very sorry if I phrased this the wrong way. You put a lot of strain on the shoulders, like a lot of responsibilities on the shoulders to take care of these people. Don't you think that sometimes it's also maybe that these leaders are not well educated or well informed on how to be great leaders?
100%. 100%. That's exactly where I'm coming from, right? And it is not, I mean, obviously every leader out there can do things for their own education, right? But it definitely is the responsibility of any organization to make sure that their leaders are educated and trained, and consistently so. Because let's face it, no one can just do a leadership training for 2 days and then be a super duper great leader all out of a sudden. It takes time to build habits, to actually bring this to life and make mistakes and learn again and go back and forth. Like in my leadership tenure, I've been a people leader for more than 11 years. And I've done multiple leadership trainings over this period of time. And I've done a lot of private coaching myself. I've also looked at sparring with other leaders. I've looked into, sorry, my voice is, I'm choking up here. I've had mentors, etc., because I just really, truly, intrinsically believe that I have the opportunity to become a better leader every day. But in order to do so, I need to self-reflect. I need to analyze what I'm doing wrong and what I could do better and how I could show up better for my people. And that is probably one super important lesson as well. Don't just look to people above you or on your same level. Talk to your team about it. I think the most important leadership lessons that I've learned actually came from my team members when they had the guts and the stamina to show up and say, Paulina, this is just not good enough. I expect more from you. I need this from you. Or I don't need this from you, right? And so this has probably been my greatest source of wisdom. And I can only recommend to any leader out there, integrate this into your leadership routines. Ask 3 questions regularly. Maybe every 6 months. Ask your maybe even more often. If you're if you're a fresh leader, ask them, what do you need more from me of? What do you need less of from me? And what can I do to make you more effective? That's a gold mine of information just right there. And if you are able to put your ego aside and swallow the hurt, and believe me, I've been there. When one of my account executives told me, Paulina, this is just not good enough for me, you know who I'm talking about. And that was really painful for me in the first beginning. And then I asked, but I stopped there. I stopped myself there and went into questioning him instead and asked, like, okay, so what exactly is it that you need? And then I learned so much, and I've become such a next level of leader because of that feedback. So don't waste that goldmine of information.
And I think a very important part of what you were saying there is, as a leader, you need to be able to put your ego aside. Because if you want people to be honest and upfront with everything, and like you say, that is a gold mine of information that you're getting, then you also as a leader have to put that ego aside, because the people that are working for you, you are their leader, so they will be attacking you if you're asking for feedback, right? To some extent, at least. So you need to put that ego aside and be willing to get that feedback. But that will make your team better. You'll have happier colleagues. And also, I think as a leader, you can learn a lot about yourself on how you can adapt to the situation, right?
Absolutely. And I'm not just saying put your ego aside for those moments when you gather feedback from your team. Put your ego aside, full stop. Because your leadership is not about you. It's about your team. It's about what they need to be at their best, what they need to be as effective as they possibly can be, and what they need to really thrive in their environment and grow and potentially even outgrow you. So ego and leadership, from my experience and my perspective, just don't go together.
Great points. Paulina, for someone... No. Okay, let me rephrase that. If we have listeners out there who's sitting, listening to this podcast, and they are thinking like, I think I'm pretty okay with my leader and the job I'm having and so on. They kind of have a suspicious on like, do I have bad leadership? But they can't see kind of the red flags or the warning signs. What are the warning signs that they have to look out for to recognize bad leadership? Not that they have to dig too much
Yeah.
about. We don't want people to say, "Oh, I have to have bad leadership out here." But
No.
what is some of the warning signs people should be looking out for?
Amazing question, Lars. And obviously, there are amazing leaders out there, and there are a lot of people who have really good direct managers in front of them. In all honesty, though, the likelihood that you have a bad leader because they are not consistently trained is quite high. So, and there are, I think, a lot of red flags that are quite common and also quite easy to spot, which is like favoritism or micromanagement or like lack of empathy. I think that's pretty easy to spot. Like, for example, if you share with your manager that you've had a personal setback in any form, sort or a form, like losing a loved one, divorce, or whatnot, and there's just no empathetic reaction to it, that's a pretty clear sign, and I think that's also pretty easy to spot. What are very common signs of bad leadership that I see, but that are usually more overlooked because they are harder to detect, is on the one hand, sorry.
Well, it's early Friday morning when we're recording this, right?
That sounds about right, Lars. So sorry again. Let me rephrase. So a very common red flag that I've seen and experienced, but that is hard to detect, is inconsistency. So when your leader basically tells people different things, like different people different things, or if they ask for a specific behavior from you and then displays completely different behavior for themselves. That is something that I find very, very dangerous, because you cannot 100% rely on them, and you will always be in this kind of limbo state with them because you don't know how to trust them, or if what they say today will still be valid tomorrow. And that is something that I've seen a lot. And another sign that is harder to see if you're not used to it, from my perspective, is if your manager spends more time with different departments or other leaders and less than they do with their actual team. That is a huge warning sign, because I would hazard a guess that leaders like that are either overwhelmed with their own role, or they just don't care enough to focus their time on what matters most for their job, which is their team.
And I noticed one word that you said, and I just know it's such a trigger word for me. That's micromanagement.
Yeah.
I hate it with a passion.
I think everybody does, honestly. I have never met anyone who was like, "Ooh, I really loved it when my manager was looking over my shoulder every day and made sure that I crossed the T's and dotted the I's." I think everybody hates it.
Do you think that micromanagement, and then I might be biased here or saying something that is viewed through my eyes here. For me, micromanagement is something I more often see in, I wouldn't say elderly people. I would more say like people that might have a very old leadership style.
Yeah.
Whereas people that are more like young at heart or youngish in leadership style, they don't tend to do it. That's my experience, at least.
That's actually a good point. I have seen micromanagement in very unexperienced leaders too.
Okay.
So very young people who, and usually in situations where they were promoted into quite a high leadership role without any prior leadership experience whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then that's exactly the point where where the insecurity comes into play again, where they've realized that they are way out of their depth, either in terms of realizing they are just not good at leading people, which is totally fine, right? Not everybody has to be good at leading people. Or if they've realized that their team is so much better on the operational side of things than they ever were, and which is also fine from my perspective, right? I don't believe that a leader has to be the best in the job. The leader has to be the best in asking the right questions to make sure that you can learn the mindset of improving your own performance every day. And and it's your job as a leader to move obstacles out of the way. So you don't necessarily have to be the best on the job per se. But a lot of insecure people that then become promoted into leadership roles, realizing that their direct reports are better on the subject matter than you are, become even more insecure. And then the only solution they see is to micromanage the fuck out of their people because that gives them a little bit of control. That's at the end of the day, micromanagement is about regaining control that you feel you've lost.
And I think that you and I both come from a sales background, right?
Yes.
And I think that a lot of time in sales, and I'm only speaking out of my experience, so I don't know if it's applicable to other departments as well, is you see a tendency to bump up the highest performing seller.
Yes. Absolutely.
And say like, oh, this guy or this girl, this person is really good at selling, like outperforming everybody. We have to make them a leader, but that doesn't make them a great leader. And like you're saying, they get bumped up. They're used to having great success and everybody liking them. And then now you're kind of the boss, and maybe people don't like you as much anymore. And your go-to is to go back to what you know, which is great selling. And then you want everybody to do the same thing as you have been doing, and you start micromanaging everybody.
Yeah. And again, that comes down to insecurity, right? And not being trained well enough. Because
Exactly.
if you do realize that you are not as good as you'd like to be in a leadership position, you'll try to control as much as you possibly can. And you, especially in a sales role, you know what has worked for you really well to become a really good seller. And you think if everybody just did the exact same things that you did, they will be just as successful, and then you will be successful as well.
Yes.
And that is one of the things that I see a lot, especially in sales, but not only in sales, is if you only reward leaders for the success on the subject matter and not also on the success as a leader, you become you get a disbalance, a huge disbalance. I always promote very strongly to make part of a manager's bonus on their effectiveness as a leader. And that you can do by, for example, by doing upwards feedback or by assessing how well they represent the company values, etc., etc. There are opportunities to measure leadership effectiveness and not just how well they hit the quota.
So, Paulina, we have come to the part of today's episode where I want to throw somebody under the bus. So, speaking about like bad leadership and so on, are there industries, and that's who I want to throw on the bus, are there industries where these issues are more common in your experience, or does it happen everywhere? Of course it happens everywhere, but are there industries where it stands out more?
I mean, you know that I've worked in the automotive industry. I've worked in fast-moving consumer goods. I've worked in AI startups. I've worked in fintech. So I've seen probably quite a big range of different industries. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you see different effects in different industries. But I would say you see different effects depending on the size or the age of a company. So in high scaling startups, for example, you will see a lot more of what you just mentioned, young people getting promoted because they are really good at their subject matter job, and then leaving them alone without any training or sparring. And this gets worse the more competitive the environment is that the company moves in, right? So, and if you have those super unexperienced leaders that you don't train, and again, I want to be really, really clear. If you are an unexperienced leader, it is not your responsibility. It is your company's responsibility to make sure that you succeed in this role. Okay. So this is no attacking young, unexperienced leaders. I love everyone out there who dares to step up to this role and this responsibility. And I just hope so much that companies learn from this and really start making sure that they help their people succeed. Because if you don't, either your new managers will burn out, or you will see a total drop in team morale. It's just what it is, right? Maybe you even see both.
I think it's a very good point, like you're saying there, because it might come out as we are attacking everybody and saying, "Oh, everybody's a bad leader," or if you're young and inexperienced, you're a bad leader. But again, like you're saying, like it is not your responsibility; it's your company's responsibility. It's them that, in most cases at least, that have failed to not dress you up for the role that you have accepted.
And again, yes, it's your company's responsibility. Yet I also don't want to say you are powerless, right?
No, of course not.
Obviously, even as a young leader, you can look for help somewhere else. So, for example, a good friend of mine that I work with in another role, she was a super fresh, unexperienced leader. She was promoted because she was really good at her job, and she didn't receive any training from the company. And she saw me working. I already had more than 8 years of leadership experience under my belt at that time, and she came up to me and she was like, "Paulina, can we do some sparring? Can you help me with this? I'm not getting any training. I've asked for a year to get training from the business. I'm not getting it. Can you help me?" I was like, "Sure, of course I will." And then we sat down once a week for an hour and a half, and I would just teach her my basic leadership like tips and tricks. And you could see her soar. Her energy exploded, her joy exploded. She had so much more fun in her role as a manager just because she understood how she could handle specific situations. And that this is not like praising me, right? It's about, I loved that she approached me. I loved that she took the responsibility to say, I need to be better at this. I need to be better for my team. And so she ventured out there and looked for help and asked for help. And that is all on her. And I admired that immensely. And she made it happen. I mean, even I gave her the tips, but she turned around and actually put them into action, right? So all the work was basically on her. And but I didn't fully answer your last question, right? So we talked about the highest like the startups and scale ups, but when it comes to more experienced or more settled companies, what I've seen is that the lack of self-awareness and self-reflection becomes a bigger problem, especially when you have been a leader for a long, long time and you're convinced you know how it's done, you've been doing it for a couple of years, you're like a pro and there's nothing else for you to learn. And I think I've said this at the beginning, there's always something new that you can learn. And therefore, I want to make this point again. If leadership performance is not measured or based on company-wide leadership standards, things can easily unravel for individual leaders or for the entire business. Make sense?
Makes perfect, thanks. And thank you very much. Like we said in the beginning, that we always like to kind of share like either personal stories that people send to us, or at least give some examples of what we're talking about, just to give some concrete feedback on the topic that we're talking about. So can you share a personal or a story that you know of as an example of leadership failure that led to valuable lessons?
Yes, happy to. There's one basic disclaimer I want to do here as well. So from my perspective, middle management is always in a specifically hard place, because they will experience pressure from above and from below. So I don't also want to look at stories from ICs. I also want to look at stories from middle managers, and even high managers, because we can learn from everyone, right? So this story is the classic story of a middle manager. It's a friend of mine who worked in a big company in a leadership role himself, and he tried really hard to do the right things. And so and especially with two quite difficult team members, difficult in the terms of the performance wasn't right, and he had to try to improve their performance within a limited time frame. And he gave them very candid and constructive feedback. He coached them, and also kept his own manager in the loop about their development. Right, so he did basically everything right that you're supposed to do. And then he went on vacation, and when he came back, he found out that his manager, without any prior announcement or any prior warning, had fired those two team members while he was on vacation.
Wow.
So he comes back to a reduced team that is in absolute shock and believes that he had been a coward and just not been man enough to have the hard conversation with his own team members, and basically relied on his boss to do the dirty work for him, right?
And it seems like he just went on vacation while the dirty laundry was taken out, right?
And I mean, I know this guy really well, so I know that he's not shitting me on this. I absolutely believe the story, and I find it so absurd, because in one fell swoop, his manager destroyed the entire trust that he had built with his team for months. And while sending the signal, I don't trust you, your ability to turn around people, do your own job well. And he just couldn't recover from that. I mean, how do you rebuild this kind of lost trust with your team? If your team members believe that you are a coward and you don't deserve to be listened to, or that no matter what even if you try to help them succeed, he might still be running his mouth again about you to his manager, and then the manager decides to make a decision on his own, right? So it was just, from his manager, a catastrophic reaction to the situation. And at the end of the day, my friend actually ended up quitting his job. And then he did a lot of soul searching and self-reflection. Again, we're at this beautiful stage of reflect yourself, because he could have also just been like, fuck this, he was an asshole, he just destroyed my life, whatnot. But instead, he turned around and he was like, okay, what did I actually learn from this situation? And so two things that he has learned is, when he enters a new team, he now has very candid conversations with them from the get-go, like on day one, telling them what his expectations are, how he's going to deal with difficult situations, and that he'll have the hard conversations with them always personally. And then he lives that, obviously, right? So he doesn't just say that he's going to do it, but he makes sure that he has very candid, difficult conversations with his team members from the beginning, so that they always know where they're at. So he places even more importance on building this foundational trust with them from the beginning. And he also develops very clear, if he does have struggling team members, he develops really clear development plans for these, like, and discusses the milestones and the uptakes that he expects to see in his team members upfront with his managers, and the thresholds after which he will actually action any other like, for example, any firings that he might action from it. And he discusses that upfront with his manager and just keeps them in the loop, and just also gets their buy-in on this. And he basically goes in there and says, okay, this is my idea, this is what I'm going to do. If that fails, then I'm going to do B and Z, and if that fails, I'm going to do D. Are you fine with that? Are you aligned with that? Is that a way forward that we can agree on? And so he's very, very clear in his communication, both to his own manager and his teams. And that has worked wonders for him so far.
What an insane story.
Yeah.
I
bring out the big guns right at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and Paulina, you know me again. You and I, we have known each other for a couple of years now. Can you imagine what would happen if I was the person in that position? I came back from holiday and my manager has fired some of my team members. I would explode.
I would go berserk. I would go so berserk. I would be. I can't even imagine. This manager broke so many things with one move. Complete nuts.
Paulina, we are coming to an end for today's episode. But for the listeners who are in, let's say, in a leadership position or an aspiring leader, where should they start if they want to improve their leadership or want to prepare for leadership?
Hands down, the self-reflection. I've mentioned it again and again throughout this episode. I think this is the most important continuous tool that you should use, including your team's feedback on your leadership style. And then make sure that I know this is hard, and I know that getting a promotion offered to you to become a leader is always tempting. And I don't know a lot of people who would say no to that. But make sure, especially if you're in an organization where you might have seen that leaders are not skilled up or trained up, make sure that before you accept the leadership role, that there is a clear training plan in place. And that training plan can just be having weekly sparring sessions and coaching sessions with your own manager on how to become a good leader. If they are a good leader, otherwise that won't really help you. But so that is something that I would be very, very keen on if I started in a new role myself, like in my first leadership role, to make sure that there is something in place there. And then keep on self-reflecting, keep on looking for mentors, asking for help from other leaders, and showing the vulnerability too, right? I mean, so many things come down to vulnerability. If you do share with other leaders that you don't know how to solve this specific situation, then they might be able to help you out on that. Of course, that requires trust to those for those people. I know that. And if you're really lucky, like I've been in my last role, you might also have a people partner that is amazing as a sparringspartner. At this point, I want to send a lot of love to you, Almog. That was my people partner in my last position, and he was the best. We had amazing sparring sessions. We could discuss everything and anything, and we would find beautiful solutions together for really hard situations. So there are always resources in your environment, either in your current job or from former jobs or in your circle of friends, that you can use to work on your leadership skills without an official training.
Perfect. So to sum up, leadership mistakes, they can have lasting consequences on your team, but it can also be very powerful learning moments. And kind of the key takeaways from today's episode is self-reflection, communication, trust, and adaptability. Oh, you say the word. I can't say it.
Adaptability.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Adaptability, accountability, super, super important tools and skills that you should have. And I want to end this episode maybe with also the words, leadership is such a beautiful, beautiful thing if you do it right. You get to connect with people, you get to help people thrive, you get to help people develop, grow outside their comfort zone, you get to influence. If you do it really well, you get to influence their entire future careers. That is such a beautiful thing.
It's a very powerful position to be in.
Yes, and I started the episode with saying you have huge responsibility, which you do, but you also have the beauty of seeing all of that come to fruition and see other people thrive. And I personally find that extremely rewarding to see and feel that impact that you can have.
Perfect. Paulina, on that note, let's end this second episode of Cultures from Hell. Before we completely cut off and tune out, please inform the listeners where can they reach out to you if they have any questions or want to share a story. And let's just emphasize, everybody that shares a story with us are 100% anonymous. We are not going to mention any persons or any company names or anything in the podcast unless you want to participate in the podcast and share your story. Then, of course, you're more than welcome to do that. But please, where can they find you?
And just to be very clear, even if you come on the podcast, we're happy to share your personal name, but we will keep your company's name anonymous in any case.
Yes. Where can I find you, Paulina? That was the question.
Oh, sorry. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my company on LinkedIn, the Culture Code Foundation. And you can also find me on Instagram under the handle Skeptical Paulina, because I am skeptical of many, many things. So yeah, feel free to reach out, DM me. We'll be happy to have you on the show.
And of course, we're going to put a link in the show notes for everybody. Then just click if they want that. For everybody listening out there, please give this podcast a follow. Give it a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. And we are looking forward to talk to you in the next episode. Thank you very much, Paulina.
Thank you, Lars. See you soon.